Hello, Mavs fans. Welcome to Pod Maverick After Dark. I'm Kirk Henderson, joined by Josh Bowe. We are talking to you on Friday night. It's about 10:20. The Dallas Mavericks just beat the Detroit Pistons at home, 123-117. Josh, how are you?
Doing okay. The Pistons are a fraudulent team.
Boom. What an embarrassing game for them.
Awful game for them.
If I'm Bernie, or whoever their coach is, I'm pissed because they played like a team expecting opponents that were going to lie down. Like from the opening, I don't think the Pistons ever won. Let me go check this.
They had a lead at 3-2. Literally, when they made their first shot, and that was the only time they had a lead. And they didn't even make was there ever a moment in this game where you felt like, oh, here it comes? I mean, I know there are a couple of turnovers where you probably thought, here it comes. But
so Beasley hits a three, and I think that makes it 109-106. And I thought, okay, here's where the Mavericks come apart at the seams. And the Mavericks got fouled on the next play, and the Pistons gave up an offensive rebound, and the game was over. Bill Alien in the chat points out that the Mavericks were I think ESPN said 8.5 points, but 8.5 point favorite. Like, that's a big spread.
Especially for a road team.
That's right. And the Mavericks just look like the better team from the beginning of the game onward. Yeah. Now, I think we should sort of talk about how that even happened. I mean, this was, if we're being honest with ourselves, the Mavericks should have beat the Sixers and the Pacers. Both those games they should have won. So I wrote this in my recap that they were due for a game where they looked like the superior team. And the thing about this is, the 6-point lead and the lead itself, the game, like the margin, doesn't really do enough to explain. If you're looking at the box score of the next game, you're like, oh, the Mavericks held on to a close one. Like you said, I never felt like the Pistons were going to win, ever.
No, they never went on an extended run. I mean, they would go on these little 4-0, 5-0, 6-1 bursts. Mm-hmm. There was never a moment where the Pistons went on a 12-2 run or a 15-5. Like something that extended over the course of 6, 7. It never happened.
Nope,
they
never
would
happened.
Have little spurts, and the Mavericks shut them down almost immediately.
I mean, the quiet player of the game for the Mavericks. Oh shoot, Spencer Dinwiddie had 31 points. I screwed up my recap. I need to go fix that while we're talking. I put that PJ Washington was the Mavs best player. That's really funny. Whoops. Spencer Dinwiddie just carved the Pistons apart. That's so embarrassing. I can't believe I did that. He had 31 points, and he only missed 5 shots tonight between his free throws and his field goals. They left Malik Beasley on him for much of the night. Sometimes Cade guarded him, but Beasley's not a good player.
Good offensive player, but he gives it back up on the other end just about as much as he gives it.
Yeah.
He's been, he's hitting almost 50% of his threes. So he's okay as a bench guy, but he had to play a lot because Tim Hardaway Jr.
Went down. Nasty and he plays more than Tim anyways.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I think he closes. But yeah, he's an awful defender. He's a terrible defender. He's always been a terrible defender. That's why he hasn't really stuck consistently to a team for the last 5 years. So yeah, the Mavericks roasted him, and they continued what they've been doing since all these injuries started. They attack off the dribble with a ferocity that's kind of hilarious when you look at the players that are doing it. The small ball works because it gives them a ton of spacing, and they are just spreading these teams out and driving them and kicking them to death.
Mm-hmm.
The Mavericks had 54 points in the paint, which isn't that's a lot. That's a good number, but that's not oh crap, that's so many. But when 54 points in the paint and you look at who the Mavericks are playing,
mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable. Spencer, no disrespect to Spencer Dinwiddie, but 31 points on 12 shots might be the most efficient game he's had in since last time he was in Dallas.
Probably. He controlled the game.
Yeah. One more thing I want to hit you with before I'm going to kick it back to you. So Kyrie went down March 3rd against the Kings, and the Mavericks lost that game pretty miserably, understandably so. Since that game, so this is no Kyrie, this is no Anthony Davis, This is no Quentin Grimes, no Luka Doncic, and then you don't even have Caleb Martin, who was in the Grimes trade, and Max Christie. You have Max Christie. Like so no Luka, no Grimes. You barely have the players that are coming from those trades. No Kyrie. Dante Exum gets hurt.
Okay.
So they've played 9 games since then. 6 of those 9 games, they've been at 115 points or more. 4 of those 6, 120 points or more. Like, they are scoring. They've been like hovering near league average offense since Kyrie went hurt, maybe even above it.
Can I ask a question? During that, are you able to look this up when cleaning the glass? What the Mavericks are shooting as a team in that little,
I need to look that up.
Non-restricted paint area, because and part of what I'm curious about is I think both, and I don't think I know this, Spencer and Najee both love attacking from the front of the rim. Like, they don't need to use the glass. Like, they're not attacking from the sides. They're not. I'm kind of being overly simplistic here, but like in PJ Washington as well. Like, they're all 3 of these guys have nice floater adjacent games, which that's sort of where my brain is in terms of the shooting. So I can filibuster for a minute.
The Mavericks shot 15 of 23 in the paint outside the restricted area.
That's crazy. So what? But what about like during? Are you able to look it up during that time frame?
Yeah, I'm going to look up. Do you want me to look up for the season?
What about the time frame you just described? Talking about like that scoring thing, because I think to me that's a really interesting segment here as far as what we're doing. I can kind of filibuster in
30 seconds.
Oh yeah, talk about the rest of the game. And additionally, like, we've not really gotten to this yet, but the Mavericks, like, they turned the ball over 20 times. The Pistons only scored 17 points off those 20 turnovers, which is pretty heinous. You pair that with the fact that I think that they missed at least 3 free throws, maybe 4 in the fourth quarter. And the Mavericks just held control of the game in this regard. And they should feel bad about this one. This was a game where they absolutely had a chance to win it. I'm looking forward to talking about some of their other players a little bit. Asar Thompson, an all-world athlete, played 16 almost inconsequential minutes for them, which I think is very interesting. Go ahead.
So I got the numbers cleaning the glass. So they separate it by short mid and long mid. Short mid is outside of 4 feet, but inside of around the free throw line. They're saying since March 3rd, the Mavericks are shooting 41.8%, which is 22nd in the league, so not that great. So,
okay.
But, Kirk, do you want to guess what they are shooting at the rim, which is shots within 4 feet of the basket?
I don't know.
They're shooting 73%.
Okay, that's really good.
That's 3rd in the league.
Wow. Does it say frequency?
Let me see yes, I can get the frequency. They're not high. They're not super high.
Right.
They're 16th in frequency. That's league
fine.
Average.
For a team that doesn't have
they should be last in all those categories. Like,
that's really interesting to me.
They are shooting better at the rim than the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're shooting better at the rim than the Milwaukee Bucks. They're shooting better. They're almost shooting as well at the rim as the Thunder. They're shooting better at the rim than the Kings, the Celtics, the Timberwolves. I mean, they're losing these games because they're it is. When Kyrie went down, I legitimately thought this would be the worst offense in the NBA.
Yeah.
And they are so far from that. It is. I know March basketball is weird and this goes into it, but this is remarkable that they are keeping pace offensively.
It's if you're looking for positives, and if you're of the camp of Mavericks fans who are like, the kid's going to be the coach, let's not even talk about this sort of thing. These are the positive signs that you're looking for. So it's really interesting. Now, let's remember, guys, this is only the Mavericks' 3rd win since the All-Star break. They had lost 9 of 10 before this.
They can't guard anyone.
They just can't guard. And so Josh and I are looking for some silver linings in relation to the play right now. We talked about this last game. We're not going to continuously harp on what's horrible, because that's not why I watch all these games. I'm not – there's a cadre of fans. At this point in the season, you're breaking out into kind of what is your Mavs fan hat. And keep in mind, I don't make this is not a judgment on anybody. But if you want to complain about Nico in the front office, I completely get it. Honestly, my Twitter feed kind of reflects that for me. Like, that's what half my tweets are about these days. If you want Mavs fans to get over it, if you want to talk about the draft, if you want to talk about tanking, like, there's different positions you can sort of take with what's going on right now. And I'm not going to judge any one person, because how you can choose to consume sports is fine, so long as you watch our podcast and listen to our podcast and leave us reviews and leave comments. You can do this however damn well you please. But for Josh and I, finding something interesting on the basketball has always been what brought him and I together. And this was a I've got to say, like, compared to how bad I was expecting all of this to be post Kyrie, I've got to say that most of these games have been something, right?
Oh, absolutely. I know they've lost a lot, but they've got maybe like two or three blowouts in this stretch, and then everything else has been down to the wire.
I mean, what's very clear is what they're missing is a large playmaker who could make a difference in deciding games, but that's neither here nor there.
No, it's remarkable this team doesn't. I mean, say what you will about Jason Kidd, and we could say a lot about Jason Kidd, especially in the post Luka trade era and the wake of that and information that's come out and all that stuff. But like, the Mavericks have had two crappy, awful seasons under Kidd. This season and the 2023 season, where they had to lose intentionally to keep their pick toward the end. Even these two seasons, as awful as they've been, there's never been a point where I felt like, oh, well, he's like, the players have tuned him out. He's lost the locker room. They're not playing hard.
Very
that was the funniest
thing.
All right, that was the funniest thing about the 2023 season, when people got really mad about them losing those two games on purpose, tanking those last two games. I was like, they tried to win.
They almost won
every
one of
single
them.
game. Yeah, they tried to win, but they tried to win up until that point. They just lost. Like, they didn't tank, and the players didn't give up. Like, they played what? Remember, it felt like 6 or 7 straight games that they kept losing, and they went down to like 4 or 5 points. Like, and it's kind of the same thing that's happening here. Yeah, they've got their doors blown off against Houston and Milwaukee and Sacramento, but man, otherwise, I mean, they've been in it, and you like the demeanor of the team on the floor. You cannot say that they've given up. Now, maybe that helps because they're a bunch of guys that are hungry that they're playing. Like, Kai Jones does not know if he'll be on an NBA roster next year.
Sure.
Same for Kessler Edwards and Brandon Williams. Like, those guys don't have the luxury of taking these games off. So maybe if the roster was maybe a little more veteran laden, maybe there'd be a chance for some let up. But I don't know. I've watched this team under Kidd for what? Is this his 4th season now? Like, there's just never been a point where you feel like you can question so much the tactics and the decision making and all that stuff. But like, team plays hard, and they played hard tonight again.
He does. They really did. We're going to take a quick break here. I've been pretty ass. Josh and I, over the last several weeks, we do have an obligation to put ads in our podcast, and we've been a little bad about that. I'm going to go ahead and do that just now, and then Josh and I will be right back. We will continue talking about this game and maybe about, once again, the Mavericks made some news. Thanks so much for sticking with us during that ad break. If you could do me a favor, if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe to the show. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to the show, go ahead and subscribe to that as well on the podcast platform of your choosing. Please consider liking the stream here. Please consider leaving comments. I've been a little lax. I have some family stuff going on at the moment, which is making doing all my Mavs stuff quite difficult. But I will continue to do all this stuff because I like our community that we have built here. Okay, so trying to think if there's like anything else kind of related to this game that's very interesting to me. I do want to talk about 2 of the Pistons. Actually, 3 of the Pistons. Can we do that? 4 of the Pistons. First, let's just kind of work our way backwards. Jalen Duren. I'm pretty sure he was the starter on the same team that Derek Lively was on when they were in high school. He was a year up and probably got a lot more pub. He's a really fun player. I like watching him battle. I prefer Lively, but I also I like watching him play. He's a big, interesting center. 5 of 5 from the floor, 14 points, 9 rebounds, couple of blocks. He's just, he's a solid archetypal guy. Is what I was thinking about him. Did you have any Duran thoughts? I doubt you did.
Other than like he had a very Daniel Gafford-esque 4 defensive rebounds in 27 minutes.
That's a good point. Quick shout out. He only played 8 minutes, but Tim Hardaway Jr. got a tribute video, also hurt his ankle. Really enjoyed the tribute video. I got to be honest, guys. Like when a guy plays for your team in the circumstances in which Tim Hardaway came to the Mavericks, which was essentially as a tax, for him to be more of a net positive than negative is just a delight. I think some of the things that we've learned since on his way out, he was a little frustrated with his role. Whatever. He gave us a lot of fun times. He also made us really mad. I mean, you watch sports to feel things, and I think it's fair to say that Tim Hardaway made people feel things.
You can't, and you just look at his career stats. Like, it is hilarious looking at everything outside of Dallas and then looking at the Dallas numbers. Like, you can't deny he had the best years of his career in Dallas. That's for sure.
Yep.
And he was part of part of a lot of playoff teams.
Yep. Really just the Tim Hardaway experience overall, kind of why you watch sports. The last 2 guys I want to talk about are Dallas locals. Ron Holland II, rookie, played his high school basketball at Duncanville. Won a state championship, then the UIL stripped that state championship because Anthony Black was deemed to have moved to Duncanville for sports purposes, which is not allowed. Neither here nor there. Just think it's kind of interesting. I really like Ron Holland. He is a fucking madman. He only played 12 minutes, got a little ahead of his skis, talked trash to Clay, lost a fast break layup out of bounds, it just looked like a Looney Tunes video. Hit a 3, which was fun. Only shoots 22% from the 3-point line. Really, really bad shooter. I just get a kick out of it. I like the local guys. That's just sort of one of my things.
Is he? You have more friends outside. I'm sure you've got some Pistons people in your group chats. Is he like their? Is he like they're young, like they want, or do Pistons fans wish he played more? And I
don't think so. My friend Tom summed it up very well. You follow Tom on Twitter. He said Holland's mistakes are less cute now that the Pistons are winning.
Oh yeah,
which I think is fair because when you go through their lineup, you can't play Asar Thompson and Ron Holland at the same time because neither is a good enough shooter. And then they have like every guy that they have on their bench just has like a clear weakness. So as much as they've risen up the ranks, they're now 7 games over 500. They just have limitations, and that's fine. Compared to where the Pistons have been years past, you want to just lean into it and do the best they can. But still, it's one of those odd things. Yeah. And then the last guy we should talk about is pretty sure he came from the Arlington area. Is Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham this season has been a little bit of his breakout season. He scored 35 points. Shot the ball 30 times, missed 2 key free throws in the fourth quarter, but also chipped in 7 rebounds, 6 assists. Honestly, Cade Cunningham, I'm really impressed with his season. I'm very disappointed in this game. He should have had like 50 points on the Mavericks. He had a couple of moves late when he was like, okay, it's go time. I'm really going to do this now. Like he had an in and out move that was it was incredible. And then he scored on a post up over Najee Marshall, where it was like Marshall wasn't even there. And the Pistons are obviously missing Jaden Ivey, but again, their shooting is just sort of limited. I figured he would have taken a lot more threes. He took 25 2-point shots. Like that's a lot of 2-pointers for a guy that's a really pretty good 3-point shooter. Just an odd game for him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because his shooting line 15 of 30 looks good. Like 50%, but he was shooting terribly for 75% of the game.
He was settling for weird fadeaway stuff and like kind of 10 to 12 foot stuff where he'd get stopped and then had like sloppy pivot work. I was very confused by his game.
Yeah. It was, this should have been a game where he should have been at the rim like 20 times, like 20 times. Like, because I don't understand. You look at the Mavericks and who was able to guard him. I mean, I guess Kai Jones had 2 blocks. PJ Washington had 4 blocks. So, the Mavericks actually played more size tonight than they've probably played in about a month.
Yes, that's true.
It feels like so that makes a difference. But again, still, he needed to live in the paint. It was a very kind of timid feeling out game for him when he was the best player on the floor, and he didn't really look like it until the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter.
Right. Well, anyway, I just kind of wanted to talk about those guys because I'm always interested in other teams' players when it's kind of an up and coming team like that. All right, I think we can kind of pivot to sort of Mavs adjacent news. I think my days are sort of blurring together. Before we talk about the Cuban interview and then get out of Dodge, I finally got around to reading Tim McMahon's final chapter. Did you, of his book?
I did. Yep, I read it.
I don't know if it's officially out yet. I just want to say, actually, you know what? I don't nobody listens to this podcast, relatively speaking, right?
Right.
I mean, my takeaway was that Nico Harrison and Jason Kidd together from that chapter decided to trade Luka Doncic. Am I out of pocket saying that?
No, and I felt that for a while because they were attached. They literally came as a package.
I mean, we know this, but that was the first thing in writing that I had seen this.
Yeah, and it really bugged me when people were at that presser the day
after
I
said
trade.
It. I mean, I was
when people were like, "Look at Jason Kidd, he looks shell shocked. I can't believe it." And it's just guys, that is not this is great acting performance, but you gotta understand he did not. Maybe it was technically true that Nico told him when he told him the trade was, but that was not the first that Kidd knew that Luka would be traded or wanted to be traded, or wanted to get him traded. And McMahon's final chapter very much sheds light that Kidd had. I mean, the same frustrations that have been reported that Nico had. Kidd had 100%.
It was reading this book. Look, I'm just going to say this. I take issue with people that don't understand what Tim McMahon's job is. Okay. Same with anybody that doesn't understand Brad Townsend's job, Tim Cato's job, anybody that's in there trying to form relationships and ask questions and write copy. Of course, there are going to be people who are more favorable or less favorable to the organization. And if you think Tim McMahon has been overly harsh of Luka Doncic and the organization sometimes, I'm probably not going to change your mind. But the bottom line is none of these guys are there to be public relations officers. That's what the Mavs have their own media team for. And McMahon writes this book where he is trying to shed light on what it is like for an organization to build up around a superstar. So he, as honestly, in this book, I thought he did a pretty fair job of being here's where the Mavericks screwed up. And it's kind of painful to read.
Yeah, to be honest. It's kind of funny that there's so many Mavs fans that hate Tim for his coverage of Luka, and this book is very much if you're a Luka fan and you're mad that how Tim covers the Maverick, this book very much is a validation of Luka and his talent.
Very big, yeah. You come out of this book being the Mavericks are so dumb and Luka is awesome. So, that's what you do coming out of this book.
Right. Yes.
Which, guess what, guys? That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, the final chapter is a doozy.
The final chapter is a real doozy. I'm surprised it hasn't really made news yet, in a big way.
Is it been released publicly? The chapter? Because it's a digital download.
So Tim McMahon, he was provide proof of purchase here on a link because someone retweeted me and said, you can get the final chapter here. And if anything in that final chapter, he goes out of his way to sort of justify the Mavericks' reasons for this, where he's trying to be I'm trying to be fair, but to me, and I'm reading this with an agenda because I don't fucking like Nico Harrison and I think he and Jason Kidd should be fired. Okay. I read that final chapter and I said, in my mind, as I'm reading the reasons and the reasoning, Nico Harrison had his mind made up to trade Luka Doncic come hell or high water. He was going to find a way to trade him. That was my takeaway from that final chapter.
Probably would have traded him last summer if they didn't make the finals.
I think so. I mean, guys, there's not a lot. Like, there's a lot of like Nico was like he says Nico Harrison was angry that Luka hurt his calf.
Yeah, the Christmas day, that was the straw.
Mm-hmm.
Like, remember we fan reaction, because there was definitely fans that reacted. They were frustrated when Luka got hurt, and like
Sure.
that conversation came up.
Oh yeah,
but those are fans. Like, they're not in charge of an NBA. Like, it was crazy to read that chapter, being like, wait, this is the guy that's supposed to be like the guy in charge, the person in charge here, cannot have that emotional fan reaction to this situation. No. Like, yeah, if a fan is pissed off that Luka got hurt and wants to blame his conditioning, whatever, fans are fans.
Yep.
But the fact that the general manager of the team had the exact same reaction and then traded him about 2 months later, like, that's.
And I mean, McMahon gets it in this chapter. He names names. He said Nico Harrison fires these people, I can't remember their names, who were Luka's friends. That doesn't feel right, but like people within
Casey
the organ,
Smith, Scott Tomlin,
but no, but he also names like the two specific trainers who were working with Luka, and it was like, and then said hired these guys, and it was crazy. Like, this chapter was explosive in a way I was not really ready for.
Yeah. The book is about how the Mavericks kind of bent over backwards to try to appease Luka, almost to the Mavericks' detriment. Mm-hmm. And then the final chapter is how Nico basically went, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to alienate him, and I'm going to make it my way or the highway, and I'm going to make things uncomfortable for Luka, and make like it's an incredible 360 about how the organization went about treating
Nico
him.
Goes out of his way to isolate Luka Doncic, and then is upset that Luka Doncic acts isolated. But that was my takeaway.
Yeah.
Okay. Last thing we'll talk about. Mark Cuban went on a comedy podcast. I can't remember the comedy podcast name. The guy's like, what the fuck happened? And Cuban gives as close to I just wasn't involved. I wouldn't have done this. Nobody kept me informed. By the way, they slowly pushed me out. Doesn't ever say he didn't, whether or not he has anything in writing from the Adelsons or from Dumont. But it's one of those things where you sort of listen and you get out of it what it conform. Right. Like, Cuban is just so good at saying stuff that'll confirm to your preconceived notions. And I went like mega viral for clipping the video, but the video's not that interesting. What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought I tweeted it, but the only thing that came to mind was like, it's very much because this is like legacy defining stuff. Yep. Like, this trade has broken the Rubicon of like, this is not a sports story anymore. Like, Vanity Fair is writing about it. Like, financial, like the D magazine did a story that wasn't even from their sport. Like, their financial guy wrote a story about, like, not necessarily about the trade, but like the implications of like what's going on and what's the Mavericks' plans to make money. Like, it's past that. So it's in the mainstream. It's like a pop culture story now. Like, Nico Harrison's going to be an answer on Jeopardy in like 5 years. Like, that's how crazy this trade was. Mm-hmm. And I think Cuban is doing all he can because he, for so long, was the face of the Mavericks in terms of who's in charge. And he tried so hard to convince the public that he was still in charge after he sold the team.
I don't understand why.
I just don't understand why. A lot of people thought, like, not us, obviously, not hardcore, but like, I talked to like family members that were like, why did Cuban do this? And I was like, no, he's not in control anymore. So like, he's going out of his way because I think he knows that he's still that in people's minds, like in charge of he's still the Mavericks guy, the Mavericks owner, not the owner, but like he's related to the Mavericks so hard that I think he is. I wonder if he is slightly worried that his legacy as an NBA owner is going to get tarnished because people just are going to associate this Luka trade with Cuban because his fingerprints were so all over the Mavericks, and he tried to continue to act like his fingerprints were all over the Mavericks even after the sale. That now he's coming out like, no, I had nothing to do with it. I had no control. I know I said I did, but I really didn't.
And I don't think he ever did.
He never did. No one pays billions of dollars for something unless he doesn't get to run it.
He's banking correctly on most people not knowing what happened, on most people never knowing, and he'll just simply answer an affirmative. Now, the problem that you and I run into is when the Mavericks moved, Tim Cato publishes what turns out to be an expose. All right. On Donnie Nelson, Rick Carlisle, I think at that point had already turned in his notice. I earnestly don't remember the order. It doesn't matter for this purposes.
I think Donnie and Rick were actually both already gone, but
Cato, but the reason, but the order of operations for Donnie was Cuban saw Tim's article. Tim sent it to him and was basically like, "Do you have any comment?" And he fired Donnie before.
Oh, okay. I couldn't remember if Donnie got fired. Yeah, I couldn't.
So Tim publishes this story, and he while he's waiting, I remember this because we had Tim on to talk about it. And granted, that's not really that big of a deal, but he moves on from Donnie. And that kind of caps what ended up being a 4-year, this organization is really fucking embarrassing thing, because there was the sexual harassment scandal, the jerk up, the guy who was jerking off at his desk, Tedry Usri, whatever his name was, the sexually harassing CEO, Earl Sneed, who had been arrested on like domestic violence charges or something and convicted. Yeah. And then the Mavericks just kept him employed despite knowing. And so like all this stuff comes out, and then the Donnie Nelson thing and like him being just kind of an embarrassing schlub to the point where.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You're in the groove. I didn't mean.
Well, it's okay. And so he fires Donnie Nelson, and then Nelson ends up suing him, which is just a big shit show. And so we're coming off this, and I remember because I'd written that article maybe right around that time. It was after Tim's article, but I said Cuban just needs to step back and stop being a thing. That was like the length of that 2,000-word article. The Mavericks then put forth Cuban then puts out that he's going to be putting together like a search committee for a GM. They're going to be using the specific company. Like they named a company. You remember this?
Yeah, it's a consulting firm. I resurfaced that earlier today.
That's right.
That's very well known for finding front office people for pro.
Then what did they do after that? Like it was within days.
Like within a day, 2 days, they hired Kid and Nico. And then a story came out that said Cuban never used them.
So he lied, which is just misled, whatever. I don't care. I'm not accusing him of anything other than doing what a lot of teams do, which is just like, hey, look over there. Bing. It's fine. Okay. But then the icing on the cake was then there was some pushback. And do you remember what happened next?
Was this when he brought out Dirk and to justify the hirings? He said Dirk was part of the council that helped make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're referring to?
I do. And I, to this day, have no idea whether that's true or not, but it just sticks in my head knowing that that was essentially Dirk's last public facing thing to do with the Mavericks.
Other than, I think, like the street.
So he shows up to games and things
I think they did the street naming after it came after.
Yes. But I mean like the team, like, as a team
part
official.
Of the team. Yes. Yeah.
That was the last thing.
Yeah.
And I just, part of me wants to know if it's true. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, Dirk and Kid won a championship together.
That's true.
They're brother. Like that part wouldn't surprise. I mean, he probably doesn't. I mean, the Nico thing is funny because Nico worked for Nike, and Nike was one of Dirk's only sponsors. But I never saw it's very clear Nico did not give a shit about the internet. No. I don't think he gives a shit about international players because I don't know how much he interacted with Dirk.
Well, Fresh Prince is talking about the Dirk interview he gave in German, which is partially why we haven't covered it. He gave an interview to his sister as part of their foundational podcast, and he was probably as candid as we will never see him this candid in English, is what I will say. If you haven't sought it out, I don't want to get any of the particulars wrong, but you can look it up. Dirk was Dirk was so shocked that he basically had to go sit down for an hour. It's bad. And it makes you feel bad. So if you want to feel bad, seek that out.
Yeah. And then my final point about that Cuban interview is just, again, Cuban is not solely to blame. He's not even 75%. I don't know what fraction you want to cut it, but the idea that he is trying to distance himself from the trade, like he had nothing to do with it, is just a little funny when he hired the two main culprits responsible for the trade and entrusted them to run the franchise. And he did that in lieu of a real formal search and interview process. I don't even know if they interviewed it. I don't think they interviewed anyone. I don't even think they interviewed anyone else.
It gets back to one of the key points in McMahon's book, or at least one of my key takeaways from McMahon's book, is that Mark was so concerned with Luka staying that he basically didn't want to change anything
or challenge
him or do anything that might irritate him at any point. And I
think what we've learned is you have to find a balance. You can't do the one way, but you also can't do what Nico did, which is like, I'm going to do everything I can to because I almost wonder, I think this isn't part of the reporting, but reading McMahon's book and reading his final chapter, I think Nico was hoping Luka would demand a trade so that the pressure would have been off of him publicly. Mm-hmm. And I think all these moves, I think he was wishing every day, will please Luka demand a trade, because then now I don't have to take it on the kisser when I do trade you, because I'm going to trade you. Like, it's very clear he was going to trade him. And I think it reached a boiling point where he couldn't wait for Luka to eventually demand a trade, or maybe he realized Luka wasn't going to do it. But I think he wanted Luka to demand it because you realize if that's what would happen, this changes so much of the emotional part of this.
Okay, well, we need to wrap this up. I got to get going. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We'll be back on Monday night if we can. Everybody, please be kind to one another, and we will talk soon. Go Mavs.